This is the Ferg Running Channel, your home for endurance, and I'm just honored today to be doing our first interview as part of the channel. Thus far, I've been doing monologues or just my own videos, and we have the perfect man for the occasion. His name is James Nuzzo, and he's an independent researcher. I've been following his Substack for a long time with a focus on exercise science and men's health, so just right up our alley. And so the place to go to follow him is Substack. It's jameslnuzzo.substack.com, and I'll have the links in the show notes on the Ferg Running channel and on our own Substack. And the reason why I wanted to get him on is to explore this fascinating development and training called minimal dose resistance exercise or minimal dose training. Especially in the endurance world, strength training is de-emphasized or almost not engaged in. It almost doesn't happen, and I think that's a real shortcoming. And one of the bases for his research into this was the fact that people just don't do strength training now. James, do you want to comment on why, if strength training is just so beneficial, why do you think it is so intermittently or just not practiced by about 80% of the population? And I assume these numbers are from Australia and the United States. Do you want to clarify where you get these numbers from?
Yeah, so we start off our kind of exploration into this topic based on the idea that there's a large number of the people in the population that don't do any muscle strengthening activities, and a large number that don't meet recommended guidelines. So this is more just for the general population, this isn't specific to athletes. And so the question is, okay, how do you get people to engage in that type of activity more often? So if you survey people about what are the barriers to them doing exercise and strength training, almost every single survey that's ever been done on this topic, the number one rated barrier is perceived lack of time. Now, it's usually listed as lack of time. I say perceived lack of time because if you objectively look at someone's weekly schedule, you can see that there are pockets of time where they probably could do exercise. So for the person, it's kind of, they perceive that they don't have enough time to exercise. That leads to the concept of minimal dose strength training, because the whole idea there is that the amount of time required to do the strength training routine is very minimal. So that's why we looked at this. We were wondering whether there's enough evidence to suggest that people could actually do a little bit of strength training and still get some benefit in their health and fitness.
Obviously, when people say they have a lack of time, it means that it's a lower priority, right? Versus, I don't know, watching TV or whatever else we get up to during the day or playing on social media. But one of the challenges is that typically, let's say when I go to the gym, it'll be 2 hours of my time gone, right? Let's say it's 15 minutes to get to the gym, 15 back, and then maybe an hour to an hour and a quarter of actual weight training. And so it is a serious portion if you go about it in that fashion versus, let's say, if I go on my rowing machine, I can be done in 40 minutes, so a much shorter period of time. So that's why this particularly interested me. And so let's say someone really believes that he has a lack of time, and you could say, well, there's this minimal dose approach, and there are different strategies to this. Now, you assist in your research a variety of, let's say, categories of minimal dose. Do you want to clarify the different categories for us, and then whether some are more valuable than others?
Yeah, so each of the different categories impacts a different aspect of your training. So like how many days per week or how much time in a given session. But the whole end game of all of this is just to reduce the total amount of weekly time or the total volume of exercise that you have to do in a given week. So each one of these kind of hits a different aspect of your training. So one example is one that we call Weekend Warrior. Weekend Warrior basically means just one training session per week. So historically, guidelines for strength training have been you have to do at least 2 days per week. And in each of those 2 sessions, you have to hit all major muscle groups. And ideally, you're doing multiple sets per muscle group. What we're suggesting with Weekend Warrior is we actually have enough data right now to say that if you just go to the gym 1 day per week, and often for people it's on on a Saturday or a Sunday when they're not working, and you just do one session that hits all major muscle groups, that is at least enough to cause some improvement in your muscle strength. Whether it improves various other outcomes, we just don't have as much data on that, but it will definitely improve your strength, particularly if you're coming from a state where you were not doing anything before strength training.
Yeah, just to clarify here, is this abstract here basically a review of all the research on these different strategies, or did you actually go in and have your own samples?
This is a review of existing literature or existing studies. Oftentimes, those particular studies that we are capturing in our review are not necessarily framed the same way we're framing this. For example, we're just looking in that case for studies that just did one strength training session per week and then compared that to a control group that didn't do any strength training per week. So that's how we're kind of capturing all that data.
I don't know if you have a personal opinion on this, but let's say you want to take the weekend warrior approach where you say, look, I'm just really prioritizing other forms of fitness and I want to do once per week. Are you an advocate for doing some kind of CrossFit approach where it is a what you'd call plyometric or body weight exercises, or do you actually promote the heavier real weights?
Are you asking specifically about for strength training or just exercise in general?
No, because it would be outcomes or stimulus on the body, because the challenge is many of us would like to think, well, what if we just do one strength workout per week? Would we be advisable to go to some kind of circuit training class or to actually focus on real weights?
Look, it's all good. I mean, one thing I've learned from these years of looking at all this literature is that pretty much everything works. Like most things are going to make you stronger. Like particularly if you're coming from a state where you haven't been doing much exercise at all this stuff is going to be beneficial for you. Yes, we can argue over nuance and percent increments here or there, but usually it all works if you're working hard while you're training. I would say, irrespective of which way you go, target the major muscle groups. You know, your quadriceps, your shoulders, all of that. Make sure that you're using a resistance that is going to stimulate a strength increase. So we know from years and decades of research, the best way to increase muscle strength is to use heavier loads. If you want to increase muscle size or hypertrophy, then you tend to back off on the load, but do more reps and more overall volume. So it kind of depends what it is you're aiming for an outcome, but it also depends on what gets you there. So I might say, look, I want you to do this. I recommend this particular type of program. And you go in and you don't like it for some reason. It doesn't do it for you. And then I would say, well, look, just then do whatever gets you to the gym, because that is better than you just sitting at home. So you have to play this game of what will actually keep people happy and engaged versus what would be kind of the ideal program for them.
This episode is brought to you by Green Pasture. That's greenpasture.org. Green Pasture offers nutrient-dense foods, particularly fish oils, including cod liver oil and a butter oil. I use these myself. I've used them for many years. They're the best quality you will find. I'm proud to promote them. Go to greenpasture.org and use the discount code FERG or FERG for 10% off. I'll also include links in the description where you can go to the products I recommend.
Yeah, well, because I think about all the different approaches, and some people would just say, what about just going and running the hills, right? So there's a spectrum of, let's say, hill running or even cycling, which is very high reps, right? Versus doing a max test of how much you can do for a squat, right? Or a deadlift or something like that. And so the weekend warrior would be to put it all your training into one basket, and then snacking, which I think is probably the most appealing to many people, where you would do a certain amount of exercise probably every day. And now, is that distinct from eccentric minimal doses, or is that one and the same?
Yeah, well, there's overlap between some of these different things. So the idea with snacking is that you do little snacks or short time periods of exercise, but you do it multiple times throughout the day and thus throughout the week. So these might be snacks of, let's say, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes max. This works a little bit better for maybe people that work from home, or I don't know, at the office they have a certain setup where this is where you can easily access certain types of strength equipment. But it might just be, let's say you're working from home and you need a cognitive break from your work, and you kind of drop on the floor. You do a couple sets of push-ups, maybe a couple sets of sit-ups, or if you've got equipment, you do some bicep curls and some shoulder press, and it's just a little snack. You just do a little bit, and then maybe you go back to work. A couple hours later, you need another break. You just go grab the dumbbells again. You do another set, and what we're just trying to get people to understand is, like, historically speaking, the way we've framed like strength training is you have to go to a gym, a particular location that has this certain type of equipment, and you have to go there like 3 times a week and hit these major muscle groups. And we're saying, look, from a physiological standpoint, you don't really have to do it that way. From an evolutionary standpoint, we would have been throughout the day carrying logs and rocks and stuff like that. So we don't have to. It's perfectly fine if that's what suits someone's schedule and preference. But there are also these different ways, like snacking, where that might suit someone's schedule a little bit better and break through that time barrier.
And again, how broad can we make this? So just one thing that came to mind, which I love, is skipping, or Americans would say jump rope, right? This is such a dynamic exercise, but it wouldn't really be considered strength training. Again, you basically would say that there's not that much difference so long as you're getting some movement in there.
When I say not much difference, I mean between different types of strength training.
Yeah, well, you were mentioning, I guess, because I guess you can approach this from just in terms of health outcomes versus performance, right? And so when it comes to health, there's much more leeway as to what you want to do. If you're looking at performance, then you want to start thinking more carefully about how you approach it.
Yeah, if you're an athlete, if you're a competitive athlete, particularly like at a more elite level, this information does not necessarily apply to you, in the sense that all of the data that we're reviewing in this paper does not come from elite athletes or athletic population. It actually comes from just the general population. So you have to be much more careful in program design for really competitive athletes with high volumes.
The truth is, though, as you say, just the regular population, that's where there's the most low-hanging fruit for improvement. Just anything is better than nothing. And that's what attracted to me. This is what attracted me to this. Just the way that a lot of people will get into an all or nothing binary, that either, like you said, either you go 3 or 4 times a week for a 1 or 2 hour session, or they'll fall behind and do nothing. And this seems to me a wonderful way around it. Now, so there's I guess you could say a spectrum there of one big workout per week, and then little doses, the snacking, and then the eccentric. Does that mean what is it called when you do you're just on your elbows, you do a plank? Would that be considered eccentric, or is it really going a negative?
It's a negative. So the plank is an example of an isometric contraction. So there's 3 types of muscle contractions. There's concentric, which means that your muscle is shortening while producing force. So the upward phase of the bicep curl, your bicep is shortening. So we call that concentric. The downward phase, where you are lowering the dumbbell back down toward your hip, that's called the eccentric phase. And your muscle is still producing force during that phase. One thing about eccentric versus concentric is that our muscles are significantly stronger during eccentric muscle contractions, about 40% stronger. The way that current exercise machines are designed. So basically, your concentric muscle strength is your limiting strength factor. You can lower a significantly greater weight than you can lift up. And so what eccentrics does, there's a couple of different things. One, we know from using specific exercise equipment that allows you to focus only on the eccentric phase, is that you get really good improvements in strength, hypertrophy, and various health outcomes from eccentric only training. The problem historically has been that exercise equipment is not designed to accommodate eccentric training, because, for example, if you want to do eccentric only bicep curls, it would mean lowering the dumbbell and then basically handing the dumbbell off to your buddy, and then you go back up to the start and they hand it to you and you do. So you're just doing the lowering phase of the exercise. But it would be at a heavy weight because you can actually lower quite a heavy weight. So what's happening now, we have new exercise equipment that is coming out. I worked for a company for about a year and a half that makes this equipment, which allows you to focus only on the eccentric part of the muscle contraction. And that's important because it is believed to be better at inducing strength gains. It also has lower cardiovascular load. So in patient populations, eccentrics are thought to be good as well.
So if you want to get the absolute biggest bang for your buck, eccentric probably makes sense. And it just in terms of getting, as you said, the best outcome, we call them negatives. I'm not sure if that's a term you'd use, but when you go and do squats, for example, and if you have someone with you and you put on more than your 100% and you just lower it down, and then your body will help you lift it back up and you lower it down. So you do very few reps, but the actual stimulus on your muscle is enormous. And it's the same when you do chin-ups, where you would go up and just lower yourself down very slowly. So you could, I guess, do eccentrics, as you say, either as a weekend warrior or as a snacking. But the idea is that you just get it, it's more cost effective in terms of time.
Yeah, and so one thing that's happening now is we don't have a huge amount of data on this with kind of eccentric snacking. My colleague at Edith Cowan University, Ken Nasaka, is the guy known for this research. And what he's been exploring over the past couple years is all these really unique study designs where he takes people and he gives them just these really minimal amount of eccentric training throughout the week. And he sees these nice improvements in strength. I'll give you one interesting example of a study design. I think it was with his colleagues in Japan that were working in some school or some facility that had, it was a multi-story building that had both elevators and stairs, right? So when you descend stairs, that's the eccentric phase of the stepping movement. When you go up the stairs, that's the concentric phase of those muscle contractions. So they designed a study where over a period of weeks, these employees either climbed up the stairs and then took the elevator down. So when they took the elevator down, they're not getting any training, right? Or they took the elevator up and then climbed down the stairs. And the group that did the eccentric training, which is the stairs going down, saw better overall improvements in their strength and cardiovascular measures and so on. So it is just one study, but it's one study in a group of studies that suggest there's something different about this eccentric stimulus.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in the running world, we know that downhill running puts more pressure on your calves than uphill. So it's actually the much, as you say, it's odd because you put more weight, but you carry it in a different fashion. It's a strange, almost paradox there. And so you put a great deal of tension, but you're actually not carrying the weight uphill. It's very confusing, but it really does put a great deal of stimulus on your muscle. Yeah.
It's actually the eccentric muscle contractions that are what cause muscle damage. or the muscle soreness. So you could go do a strength training program using a particular like machine and only do that concentric phase of like the bicep curl. And you could just do that a series of reps and fatiguing sets, and you will get minimal to no muscle damage afterwards. But if you even take like a light resistance and you do quite a few eccentric only contractions, you'll likely get some muscle damage. So these eccentric contractions are very interesting, and we're trying to kind of understand how to best prescribe them, because you have to play this game, right? You don't want to damage people's muscles too much, because then they'll be out of commission for several days, right? But we also know that it's a quite potent stimulus for strength and hypertrophy. So how do we prescribe eccentrics moving forward? And we're still kind of debating that.
In a practical matter of someone working at home or even going to the gym for a short period, would you actually recommend particular exercises? As I said, the one that comes to mind to me would be chin-ups. A lot of people cannot do chin-ups, and you could just get a bench and then go up and then just lower yourself down from the bar. Like you could go up and just lower yourself down. But were there other exercises that came up in this review? So, because I'm trying to think how you would do push-ups in a negative fashion. I guess you could, but you'd have to put weight on your back or something would be more confusing.
Yeah, well, if you're someone that can't do a push-up, like one push-up, what that means is you can't do the concentric phase of the push-up, because that's where you're weakest. You can't push yourself back up from the floor, but I'm pretty sure you would be able to lower yourself down to the floor. That's the eccentric phase. And that would be still good for you. In fact, it's likely that just doing that would eventually allow you to be able to do the actual push-up. The question is, how do you get yourself back up off the ground after you lower yourself down to it? You could kind of roll over and figure something out. But that's actually part of the problem with eccentrics, is that we are still kind of developing equipment that would basically do the pushing up phase for you while you focus on the lowering down.
Yeah, because if there are these assistance machines when you do pull-ups or chin-ups that will lift you up, but I guess ideally that you would suddenly turn off the support when you're going back down. And but are there any ways right now that are accessible to people? Because I think this whole idea of getting, let's say, cost-effective strength outcomes or time-effective strength outcomes, are there ways that people can go to right now, or do you have to actually find specialized equipment?
Okay, off the top of my head, if you my colleague Ken Nasaka, Edith Cowan University. If your listeners look up his name, I think you'll be able to find some home exercise programs. I think he might have a video on YouTube. I think it's more designed for older adults, but it's body weight eccentrics. And he does have a particular way of designing it so that you're able to kind of lift yourself back up. I'm just drawing a little bit of a blank on all the particular movements.
It seems to me that it fits better with partner training if possible, because then the person could spot you during the concentric while you then go into the eccentric. That's why, and because it can be more dangerous, as you say, you're really pushing, you're recruiting every muscle fiber you've got, and therefore you're more likely to break yourself. So that's where the squat machine in particular, squat exercise would be more vulnerable here, because you're really recruiting everything. Of course, you'd get huge improvements as long as you don't break yourself.
One quick example I can just think of off the top of my head is this is more older adults, what I'm talking about now. If you've ever watched sort of an older adult try to sit down at the Thanksgiving dinner table or something in the chair, they do this big plop down onto the chair rather than that slow, controlled movement. And that's because they lack the strength in their quads and their glutes eccentrically to lower themselves down under control. So one thing to just specificity of training is to actually just have them do that would be eccentric training. It would be training to just lower yourself down slowly into the chair, And then if you had it set up where maybe there was like a table nearby, they could use their hands on the table to help do them the concentric phase and get them back up, and then they could lower themselves back down doing the eccentric and just repeat that. So you can kind of put different things around you in your environment to maybe assist you.
Yes, one way to do that would be to do pistol squats, but lower yourself down without any support, and then bring yourself up with something. So if you had something to hold on to while you're doing pistol squats or one-legged squats, which are great exercises. So now you found that the weekend warrior, and what is the single set exercise? Now you said that this is the most strongly supported by current research. So what is the single set resistance?
So remember, weekend warrior was you just doing one training session a week and doing it all and probably multiple sets in each exercise that you do. Single set is different. It distributes the training frequency throughout the week. So you do like 2 or 3 sessions per week, but when you go to the gym or you lift at home, you're only doing 1 set per exercise. So you're just doing 1 set of squats, and then you're moving on and you're doing 1 set of chest press and 1 set. So you're going through 8 to 12 different exercises, but it's just 1 set per exercise, maybe on Monday, and then you do that again on Thursday. And it could be completely different exercises, and that's it. That's single set. So the sessions are quite quick because you're only doing 1 set, and we've got enough evidence now to suggest that, the general population will get stronger with such programs.
Yeah, and so I guess I missed one. So the others, you've got weekend warrior, snacking, and eccentric could go on, I guess, all of these, but then the single set resistance, and then a strength test. So actually just doing 1 max rep per week of each exercise. That seems insane, but yeah.
Yeah, that is the most kind of I don't know, obscure one of the group, the most unlikely. But where that actually comes from is more from the history of isometric training. Isometric contractions, so that's where the muscle length is not changing while you're creating force. Classic example is just doing a maximal grip strength test. That's an isometric. And we have heaps and heaps of data on that particular test, strength test, where if you just train and do some maximal contractions, just a few of them per week, then that's better than doing nothing. And the reason that probably is because of the nervous system drive to the muscle. You're basically keeping that nervous system, those signals active. And the best way to do that is by sending as much gush, as much neural stuff to the muscle. And the way that you do that is through a maximal contraction. So this is more, it's the least kind of practical out of them, but in certain like rehab settings, this might have value. So we cite an interesting paper in our review about rehab and stroke patients who were trying to get their grip strength back. And what that study found was that when you did like a sort of increased number of maximal grip strength contractions in a shorter amount of time, you were able to get that patient closer to their baseline strength quicker. So instead of distributing the training sessions like we historically do, like 3 sessions per week, they said, no, let's go at it. We're going to go like 5 days per week, and we're going to do maximal grip strength testing every single day. And what they found was that was a faster pathway to helping the stroke patients regain their strength.
It is very strange because basically it means all testing and no training because the testing is the training. Yeah.
That's right. That's the whole concept. When you do strength testing, it's a form of training.
But so you basically say that the most in terms of the actual research that is available, doing a weekend warrior all-round session or a single set resistance exercise approach where you might do one or two very short or a few short sessions per week, but each session only has one set of each exercise, so you could do it in 20 minutes or something like that. These have the most backing for actually getting results.
That's right. The studies of the snacking, I think, are going to continue to be published. It's a relatively new concept that people are starting to explore. So I think you're going to see more of that research come out and probably solidify that as a legit concept. So yeah, keep an eye out for more of that work coming.
Well, you hear all the time about some sort of push-up challenge. You do one set of push-ups every day for a month or whatever. And these smack me as just not sustainable. That's the real problem, that at some point you're going to want something a bit more elaborate. And also, my understanding is that doing strength training all year round is not healthy. At least when you're doing it in an intense manner, you really need a break to let your body recover. Do you encourage this sort of periodization? I know this is getting away from your research, but
I would just say for general population, not a specific athlete population. I think dabble in various types of physical activity, sport, and exercise, and just go with where your interest is and what you're most likely to do and what you find to be beneficial. I think it's worth giving most things a go to just see what it's like. But if you find that for some reason strength training just keeps, I don't know, bothering you in some way, and you've explored different options, you've talked with, I don't know, personal trainers or physios or strength coaches, and you still can't work it through, well, I don't know, maybe it's not, your body's not geared up for it, but just find the thing that you think, yeah, you'll be able to sustain throughout your life, and that will, allow you to have a good quality of life.
right. Well, we've raced through the half hour, and I don't want to take more of James's time. He has got a great story, or fascinating story of his own, challenging political correctness or censorship in academia, and maybe we'll save that for another day. But I'll place the link in the show notes. It's just at jameslnuzzo.substack.com. And the headline of the article, which is most pertinent, and he's got an audio version too, which is great, is minimal dose resistance exercise. And that goes through it gives a lovely overview of this for people who, let's say, are struggling to get that 3 or 4 full workouts a week. Obviously, something is better than nothing, and that's what the research shows. So, James, I admire your work, mate. And I believe you've got an incredibly valuable and fruitful Substack or newsletter. So I think it's one that people who are also in this space, let's say, of producing newsletters and content should look to. And so obviously I appreciate your time, and I hope I can continue to learn from you. Thank you.